What is up, everyone? JD here. Hope you're all doing well today. Today I'm really excited to bring you my full review of the Brian Brown design Yeager. Thanks and shout out to refined_EDC. Javier was nice enough to send this along for me to have a look at. What we're going to be doing today is going through specs, size comparisons, and thoughts and impressions, and if I have any alternate recommendations, just really quick. And again, Javier, thank you for sending this along because I do like to show what it comes in. You get a smooth outer layer taco pouch. It does appear to have come in a pack, and then you have the two pockets that can hold two knives, or you can store the knife with the card information in here. And speaking of, let's go ahead and pull out this COA. You can see here all of the information. That's weird. It says the collar is blue anno. I'm wondering if Javier maybe swapped that out. Maybe he didn't like the blue and he wanted it to be all monochromatic. Either way, it looks a good looking knife. And let's go ahead and jump into the knife specs. The Yeager has a 3.5 inch M390 blade, 4.1 inch titanium handles. It is a frame lock. Overall length is 7.6 inches and the claim weight is 4.6 ounces. Let's go ahead and check the weight out on the Yeager. Whoa, whoa. All right, we're gonna lay it sideways. 4.4, so coming in just a little bit lighter. Yeah, just a little bit lighter than the claim weight on the website. And I'm not quite sure what could play into that. Now, I don't know a whole lot about the knife. This is my first time experiencing it. So I do believe they come in a couple of different options. I think there's the flipper only or the flipper with the thumb stud. Let's go ahead and run this through some size comparisons, and then we'll jump into my thoughts and impressions. First up is going to be the Spyderco Yojimbo 2. The Yeager is going to be close in size to the Yojimbo 2, which is also very similar to the Spyderco Para 3. And we'll bring out the Shaman, which is going to be larger than the Brian Brown. I do have the skinny scales, so just for reference, in case you're wondering, here it is against the Bay Shamans with the Bay Shaman scales. I don't know if that helps anyone from a size reference. Very similar in size to the PM2 as well. I find that those are very close in size and very recognizable knives if you're familiar with them. Next up, we're going to bring out the Benchmade Bug Out. The Bug Out is going to be very similar. I don't know what's going on with me today, guys. I am struggling with putting these knives down. The Benchmade Bug Out is going to be very similar in size to the Brown, just a little bit longer overall. And since I am loaning my SIG K320 out to Dave over at Sat2 Dave, I am going to be using the ZT0562 as the stand-in for the size comparison. And as you can see, the Yeager is smaller than both these knives as far as length, more girth than the Bug Out. Last but not least, we will bring out the budget knives once we get these two out of the way. First will be the Kubi KU321. I think a lot of people are familiar with this particular knife. And as you can see, being it's a sub 3-inch knife, the Yeager is a little bit bigger. And then the other budget knife that I love to use, that a lot of people are familiar with, is going to be the Buck 110. The 110 is more slender and longer overall. Let's go ahead and do a size comparison from a profile perspective. That way you get an idea just how thick or thin this knife is. All right, let's go up against the Royal first. So almost as thick as the Royal, not quite, but very close. Let's go ahead and grab the Bug Out. And you can see the Bug Out is thinner than the Yeager. And last but not least, we have the Yojimbo 2, which also is the same thickness as the Para 3. So hopefully that helps you and you have an idea of how it's going to carry, what it compares to as far as sizes for other knives, and how heavy it's going to be in the pocket and how much real estate it's going to take in the pocket. All right, let's jump into the knife itself. So it has, again, a 3.5 inch M390 blade. This is a sheep's foot or a modified sheep's foot blade. It is very steep out at the tip and it has a very deep hollow grind. The plunge actually is going right up to the blade's edge, but it also doesn't look like they sharpened it all the way to the edge because it doesn't feel pointy at all here. I think that's kind of nice because if you do want to choke up a little bit here, you can kind of get into like a position that'll let you do some detailed work with the knife without it poking into the back of the blade. Now I did run this through some paper and it felt like it had a little bit of work put in on it, so I'm thinking Javier has been using his knives, and I'm not surprised at all because he always says he has no save queens. And once I ran it through the paper, I went ahead and ran it through the cardboard as is. Then I took it across the strop, tried to work out any kinks or anything that might have been going on with the tip, and then I just ran it back through some paper just to make sure that the edge didn't have any rough spots or anything that was going to catch it as it was going through the paper, and it seemed to go through the paper just fine with no issues. I think I took it maybe 5 or 6 drops on either side just to touch it up a little bit. It didn't feel like it needed much, so stropped right up, no issues. So I think the M390 on this is going to be good to go, and I think the hollow grind is going to work really nicely cutting through your materials. It is a very thick stock on the back, but again, that hollow grind goes almost the full length of the blade. It gets very thin about midway through that carve out, which is really nice. The thumb hole I have found is a little tight for me with larger hands, meaning I have to kind of, you see, I have to scoop to get in there. If I just lay it on there, I can get it, but I feel like my thumb slides across as I deploy it because it does have a heavier detent. The reverse flick is fine. It's a little high up for me, again, with larger hands, so I kind of, instead of being able to come down to like right here, which would be natural, I have to come up just a little bit to catch it, and then the meat just slides right into the hole just fine, and it deploys. Now the flipper tab does have jimping all the way around the curve, but it is a little bit smooth, but I think it has just enough bite to catch for the light switch. I would not push button this. It's not very comfortable in my opinion. It's really pointy out on the tip where you would do the push throw as opposed to the light switch throw. I think it works really nice with both deployment methods, and it does have nice action. It was a little resistant when I got it, so what I did is just took a little dab of oil. Let me grab my flashlight so I can show you, and I threw just a dab on the detent ball right there. Well, it looks like you can see, but it's on the left side of my thumb, the detent ball, which makes for a very early engagement. Oh, while I have the flashlight out, you can see all, oh, I turned it up, sorry guys, hold on. You can see all of the milling on the inside here. By the way, this is the LumenTop AA tool. This is linked down below if you're interested in this. It's really nice because when you cut it off, it has a power indicator in there for like 20 bucks. I would spend the 29 to get the one that comes with the battery. So immediate engagement, and it falls shut. With that little bit of oil, it made it really a smooth close, even though it does take a couple of shakes to close it. It definitely felt a little bit smoother, so I'm thinking it was just a little dry and it needed a little bit of lube to eliminate or remove some of the friction that it was encountering. On deployment, it feels really smooth and it has some pretty good sounds. So I like how crispy and the acoustics as it opens. And then it looks like it has a smaller stop pin, but it's so low and the shouldering so good there that it feels really solid when it hits. It doesn't feel cheap or dainty or whatever you want to call it when it opens. It has a really nice solid click when it opens. The handle itself is just flat titanium. There's no milling, there's no orange peel. It is a little sharp on these corners here. You can feel it a little in hand, but again, it doesn't hurt, not uncomfortable. You can just kind of feel it squared off. It reminds me a little bit of my Chavez. So when you look at the Chavez, you can see it does have like that same style of sharp corner, but I feel it a little bit more on the side. No, I feel a little bit more actually on the top now that I'm testing the two. So they're both kind of built the same in that regard. Now it does have a almost 3/4 length, or it actually has a 3/4 length backspacer on here that wraps around. That's really nice. It is a proud backspacer, so it stands up and you can feel that just a touch when you're holding the knife in hand with your regular grip. Not that that means it hurts or it's pokey or that you can feel it like stabbing into the hand. You can just tell there's a difference where it's raised with it in hand. It's not uncomfortable. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't affect the ergos whatsoever. Now, I would probably have gone for the flipper only version, because for me with larger hands, when I'm behind the flipper tab, I'm actually just falling off the back of the knife, and that scalloped, no, it's not scalloped, but that cut right there, it's so sharp that I actually am sliding off a little bit when I'm trying to hold that knife like that. I found that I actually prefer to come up over the flipper tab and hold it as such, and I think the flipper tab feels a little hot on the finger when I'm holding it for push cuts. I think I would have liked the flipper only version without the flipper tab on there, meaning I would rather have had it with just the holes for the deployment, because I think that actually would have benefited me from a purchase perspective. My hand would have fit on the knife a little bit better, would have been a little bit more comfortable. What I do like about this though, even though it is a smaller knife, it's nice and chunky. It has good girth to it, so it does fill the hand out, even though it is a little short for me when I'm behind the flipper tab. So I like that thickness, feels good in hand, feels like I have a good grip on it. I'm not going to slip or fall off of it. And even though it is a smooth scale, I've found that I have like no issues gripping it. And it's a little warmer today, and I was in the yard earlier doing some work, so my hands are warm enough to where if there was any type of moisture that was going to build up, I'd feel that slippage, and I'm not feeling that at all. So the knife is pretty impressive for the build. It feels like it's very well built. The ceramic bearings and the action and the pivot feel very nice. It's a very clean design. It's nothing fancy or that's going to jump out at you, but it also, in my opinion, has like a really nice profile to it. I like the aggressive look of that sheep's foot, and I love the clean lines, the one scallop here, and then you have just these two cuts at the end, and then otherwise it's a pretty straight design. Now, what are some alternative recommendations if you're looking at this knife? Maybe you don't want to spend over $300 on it. If you don't really care about the materials too much, you can go out and get yourself an AD 20.5 for around $190. You can get it with the 3V, or for $160 you can get with the AUS 10A, which I think the Taiwan plant has corrected the issue with the AUS 10A, because you can see I use this a good amount, and that's probably after a little bit of cleaning. Let me see, maybe I need to wipe it off and see before I say that I think that was a little bit of cleaning on there. And this is just a dry wipe down, so I'm not really sure what I was running this through before. So you can still see some of the scarring in there, but I think they got the AUS 10A fixed. Thick geometry on the blade, not as thick as what you're seeing on the Yeager, a little bit thinner through the handle material as well, but you're having very similar height and a very similar blade shape. So if you don't have the budget for this, but you like kind of the overall profile, I think that the Demco AD 20.5 gets you kind of close, a little more contouring, a little more scalloping around the handles, but the blade shape is really going to be nice. And again, even if you went for the 3V, which is an extremely tough steel, they generally use that for fixed blades, so it may be overkill on a folder, but I really don't mind, because that equates to like really good edge retention but difficult of sharpening. That 10A is going to be around the 14C Nitro V N690 type performance from what you're getting. Going to be really easy to sharpen, and it's going to hold a decent edge. If you want something comparable, I mean, I had the Chavez out here earlier, and that's not quite the same blade shape as I don't know how I just pinched my finger in there. I think I was holding the knife up way too high, but this is roughly going to run you about the same price. It's going to be a little bit more curvy with a little bit more scalloping underneath, and it's going to have a hollow grind similar to what you're finding on the Yeager, but it's going to be a compound grind because it's going to have that strength out on the tip for the drop point. So it's not quite the same, but it does kind of give you that same vibe where it's monochromatic, a little bit more in your face, more hard edge, really large jimping on the back, so a little bit different. And then if you wanted one more recommendation, you could, this is definitely one of my favorite knives, if you wanted a USA made knife, this would be a really good alternative. I know the Yojimbo 2 is not the prettiest girl at the dance, but she's got the moves, and you get her on the dance floor and she's going to rock your world. That's what I'm trying to say about this. Like, it feels so good in hand. It performs really well. I've had this for a long time. I use it a lot. I've been warned about being careful with the tip, but it's always been don't drop it. I think that's pretty easy for me. I am very careful when handling my knives. I try not to be careless or carefree when I'm handling them. So I really like this a lot. I think it's a nice USA alternative. The base model comes with S30V. This DLT trading exclusive Sprint still available, 20 CV, and if it's Spyderco, the 20 CV is going to be one of the top performing 20 CV steels you'll ever put your hands on. But if you like this knife, it's worth picking up. Just keep in mind, if you have the larger hands, go for the flipper only version. I'm sorry, the thumb hole only version with the flipper delete. That's going to be a little bit better for the ergos. Your finger is going to rest on top of this flipper tab, but it's not that bad. It's a little pokey because it's sharper around the edges here. It's not really chamfered down, and it doesn't have a really big landing pad, but you can get away with it. If you prefer to have the flipper tab for the deployment, it's not bad. But if you can thumb flick the thumb stud, you can thumb flick on the thumb hole. It's going to work just fine for you. All in all, great little knife. Thank you again, Javier. Before I forget, the lockup. Didn't talk about the lockup. You're looking at about 20% lockup on the spine of the knife. That may wear in. If the M390 is hard, it's going to take a little while. And the pocket clip is not my favorite. The reason I say that is because of the fact that I've had a little bit of a hard time getting this to go in and out of the pocket. It kind of slides up into this area and gets bound up. It's not super springy. It's actually very stiff. And then the detent, again, with it being stiff, makes access to the lock bar okay. It's a little sharp. What they did is they knocked it down just a little bit for you to get to it, and then they started to chamfer it, but then they kind of chamfered and rounded out. And I think the reason they did that is so that you had the comfort here. I think I would have preferred them have something similar to what you see here on the Roxy. I think if they would have milled it out like that, because the Roxy doesn't feel uncomfortable when I disengage, and it has a little bit of a softer detent. This is definitely stronger, and I think that's probably because they needed to put more of a cut on the relief. Maybe not. It's about the same here, but I think that's a little bit thicker of a lock bar. Maybe just a touch thicker. It's really hard to tell because you see it kind of jumps down from the material a little bit to get to that lock bar, but the relief cut looks like it might be a little bit bigger on the Roxy, and I think that's probably why the Roxy feels really well tuned. This just feels really stiff. So if you have weak hands and if you find that you have issues with lock bars, that's something to keep in mind with this one. It's a little stiff and, again, a little hard to actuate, but if you have that medium hand, you might be able to get your finger in here a little bit better, and you might be able to operate it a little bit better as well. So I didn't want to forget about that. All in all, it's a nice knife. I think for the money, I probably would spend my money on something else, or I would definitely at the very least get the thumb hole, because it wouldn't fit my hand. My hand is just too big for this particular model. It feels well made. I love the hollow grind, and I love the no nonsense looks about it. But for when you get over $300, I think it's a little bit more that you're paying out. So I feel like I want to be a little bit more critical. I'd probably go towards the Chavez for my personal style choice and the fact that I can get all four fingers on it. Or you could even, if you like the Roxy and it's giving you kind of that similar style and around the same size, it's not exactly the same, but it is fairly close. You got a little bit more tip out here, and they are perfectly lined up here. So a little bit more blade length and a little bit more cutting edge on the Yeager, but you got better ergos because you have a full forward finger choil on this knife. So it's actually more comfortable in hand, and you're getting this for about $100 less. But it is S35 versus M390, which is really not that big a difference. When you talk about high performance steel, I feel like S35 easier to sharpen, easier to maintain, and has fantastic edge retention, where you have excellent edge retention here, but way more difficult to sharpen when you compare it to S35EN, way more difficult to maintain or maintenance when you're trying to strop it back. So just keep all that in mind. Thanks again, Javier, for sending this in. Beautiful knife, my friend. I will be getting this back out to you now that I've completed the review. Thank you again for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. If you do like it, consider subscribing. I'd love to have you follow along, totally up to you. Don't forget those links are down in the description. This was not available at the time of this video, but I will link it to a couple of places where you can pick it up. I think Knife Joy was the only one that I could find, but there may be other vendors. You'll just have to put your notifications on if you're interested in this when it comes back in stock. I will also link the other alternative recommendations that I made down there for all of you so that you can find that really easy. I hope all of you have a fantastic week. Until next time, peace.